Hey, concrete friends, concrete fans, concrete artists. Welcome to The Joy of Concrete. I'm Mr. Concrete Concrete. I guess this really isn't a Joy of Concrete episode. Oops, that's the wrong mold. This is the right one. Today is something a little bit different. Today, I'm taking a look at a mold, taking a look at one of the molds that we sell you. This is an old model. We've made a few changes, but it's relatively the same. But taking a look at a mold, this has been a test mold since the very beginning of us making molds. So I've gotten to do a lot of castings in it, about probably 50, 60. This is a mold that we sell for $49. And it's a mold that we make here in Canada, Montreal, Quebec, Canada. And we make them by hand just for you in the same way. These are professional grade, really high quality molds. So let's walk through a little bit about why this mold is great and what it looks like after about 50 castings. So the first thing you're gonna notice, it's got some blue staining. The more blue pigments that you use on molds, they stain. I would recommend you wash your molds after every usage, give them a nice wash. If you're getting blue staining, there are things that can take it off. Vinegar, baking soda, a little bit of soap and water with even some spray cleaners, an all-purpose cleaner, like all-purpose kitchen cleaner will do it. This is silicone, so it's the same type of things that are used on lots of kitchen implements. So most all-purpose kitchen cleaners, if it's safe for kitchen stuff, baking supply, cleaners, it'll work. It'll work on the mold. But let's get into this mold. 50 castings, what's going on? So you can notice some things. I've got some mold breakdown. Let's look. So see these little nicks? Some little nicks there. A couple little nicks up there. A couple nicks there. Past that, pretty good. A little bit here and there. Not too bad. I'm still confident we can use this mold quite a few more times. But the first thing, why does the mold break down? Why is a mold like this? Why is it breaking down? What's going on? Most of the time, these nicks, these scratches, happen during the demolding process. And they happen from, a lot of times what's causing this is voiding in your concrete. So the voidier your concrete is, the more voids you have when you go to demold, the more likely you're going to cause microabrasions all inside. And those microabrasions create a place, a foothold for a little concrete to just catch. Why does a void do that? Well, voids think about a bubble, an air bubble, pushed against a flat plane. And depending on how far that air bubble intersects that flat plane, you might have a half sphere, you might have a 3/4 of a sphere. But at any point, when you have a sphere intersecting with a flat plane, you're going to end up with a tapered edge of concrete that ends up basically like a knife, like a knife. And those little shards of concrete, number one, they can catch on here when you're demolding and pulling it apart. But number two, they can drop off little tiny bits of concrete, those little flaked edges of flinty, sharp bits of concrete falls into your mold. You're trying to demold it, pop it out, catches it. So after 50 castings, this is actually quite good. If our concrete was voidy, if we had a mix that didn't self-consolidate, if gray matter left a lot of voids in here, the voidier your concrete is when you go to demold, the more nicks and abrasions you'll get. What's something else to take a look at? Something else to take a look at, you'll notice over time, I've got some rounding. My edge is actually rounded a bit. That's because anytime I have nicked my concrete and started what looks like was maybe going to be a cut, I try to just trim off an edge that looks like it's going to catch something, and then I take a little bit of sandpaper and I just sand it smooth, make it so that it doesn't create a foothold. I don't want an edge like a hangnail. If you have a hangnail, you trim it off, clean it up with a file. Same thing with the mold. If your mold develops a hangnail, get rid of the hangnail, because if you catch a hangnail on something, oh man, it's the worst. That's the worst part. I think that's the only thing I think of when someone says the word hangnail. I think, oh, I'm going to catch that on something. That's my only association with hangnails, is them catching things and hurting. And I'm like, okay, hangnails we get rid of. Hangnail concrete mold we get rid of. The bits. What's something else? Our void. Look at the internal void. Look how squishy it is. it compresses. Oh, because it's hollow, but it doesn't compress too much. This is a bit of a balancing act when it comes to mold design. We need this to be able to compress. You don't want this to be solid. If this is a solid brick in the center of your mold, this is gonna suck for demolding, and it might actually not demold at all for you, or make it so that you have to put so much force on the mold to demold that this itself, if this was solid and didn't compress, hey, if I didn't compress, I'd make it nearly impossible to actually get anything out of me. And you'd have to pull so hard that you'd end up tearing all down here because you'd be like, basically turning the mold inside out. So yeah, that's another thing. Another thing you might notice about our molds is that you'll notice that the shape of an object stops at about, I don't know, let's say 1/8 of an inch before the end of the mold. And then there's just a blank section, a little bit like a lip. You can really see it. It's pronounced. On a mold like this with the taper, you see it right there. It's really pronounced. It's this last, almost like a bit of a return. This return, when you're pouring concrete, don't pour past it. Stop. Stop before you hit the return. Stop before you see the shape, the contours of your object change into this return. Why? Because if you pour into this section here where there's no shape, you're going to grind all this off or sand it off. That's a lot of work. I see the return there. So you might say, why did you design it like that? Why did you make a thing that I actually can't just fill this mold to the top? The reason why we designed that is that if you have shape and contour on a mold and you go right to the top, we run into the same issue that we have with a sphere hitting a flat plane. So think about your object. If your object has any amount of curve, and we do end up undercutting some of our objects just a little bit at the back here to make life easy for you and give you a nice clean look. But the reason why we do that, and the reason why we add this little bit of a stovepipe or return here, is that we want a thick edge. We actually want a little bit of thickness, about 1/8 of an inch of thickness right there, because it makes a mold less likely to tear. If it ends up really thin right here, a little bit of a thin little corner, that wants to tear off easy, very easy. So we leave just a little bit of thickness right there, just on this edge. That actually isn't your object. It's a different part, and it's not meant for you to pour in there. But here it is, 50 castings. I'm still going to use this probably another at least 50 times. It's feeling great. We may see more breakdown as we keep using it, but it's still very functional. So far after 50 castings, and this mold was $49, yeah, we're looking at about $1 a casting is what this mold cost is broken down into at this point. So great quality mold can last you, if you're washing it after every usage, can last you a long time. Some molds, my maximum for a mold, I've broken the 250 mark with castings in a mold. Crazy, right? No, it's not crazy. You can do it too. With a good mold, a mold should last almost indefinitely. That being said, molds break down, and if you don't look after breakdown right away with your molds, if you don't look after it and be like, oh, I'm starting to break down, and kind of clean it up, trim it, sand it down a bit, yeah, that could mean your next 3 castings, that little bit of breakdown gets worse. And then one day you go to demold it and the mold just tears, rip down the side. It can happen and it stinks. So look after your molds. This one's looking great, but that's everything. Deep dive. If you have any more questions about molds, you can ask me in the comments below. Text, phone, email, however you want to get a hold of me. Hit up the website, www.concreteconcrete.com. Check out the molds and look at a mold and you're like, I got a question. I got a question about this mold. Why does this mold look like this? I'll tell you why. I guarantee there's a reason. Thanks, everybody. Hope you had fun doing a deep dive on molds. We didn't make any concrete today, but we looked at one of the most important tools to making concrete is molds. Making beautiful concrete, you need a mold. So it was good to talk about it, and we should talk about it more. It's important. Goodbye, everyone.